when every child at the Christmas party is handed a gift, except one. And then, at the very last moment, her father pulls out something no one expected, changing everything. My name is Claire Jennings. I'm a 36-year-old public school teacher, mother of one, and for the past 12 years I've been trying and failing to fit into a family that never truly wanted me there. But nothing prepared me for the moment I watched my daughter, the only child in the room, stand quietly, blinking back confusion as every cousin tore through piles of luxury Christmas gifts, and her name was never called. She didn't cry. That would have been easier. She just stood there staring down at her polished shoes, the ones she insisted on shining herself the night before. Her little hands, once clasped with excitement, now fidgeted nervously with the hem of her red velvet dress. That dress had been a gift from my mother-in-law the previous year. It was too tight now, but she wore it anyway, hoping it might remind Grandma that she mattered too. I should have known better. I should have walked out the second I saw her name missing from the gift list. But I didn't. Because a part of me, the naive part that still clung to hope, believed that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this would be the year we weren't invisible. If you've ever sat silently while someone you love is excluded in front of you, if you've ever had to bite your tongue to keep from ruining the illusion of family harmony, let me know where you're watching from and how you would have handled it. Sometimes sharing our stories is the only way we heal. Let me rewind just a little. 12 years ago, I married Daniel Caldwell, a charming, intelligent man born into a family where legacy mattered more than love. The Caldwells weren't just wealthy, they were institutionally wealthy. Think golf club memberships that dated back 4 generations, family crests engraved on silverware, and vacation homes in places most of us only see in movies. I came from a modest background, raised by a single mom in Kansas, worked 2 jobs through college, and proudly earned my degree in art education. My biggest luxury growing up was a used car that didn't overheat in traffic. The first time I met Daniel's parents, Margaret and Charles Caldwell. Margaret looked me over like I was a slightly bruised apple at a farmer's market. "She's earthy," she had whispered, not quite quietly enough. I remember Daniel squeezing my hand under the table, a silent apology. We married anyway. Love was enough. Or at least I thought it would be. From the beginning, Margaret made sure I knew my place. I was invited to events, yes, but always seated beside the wives of junior associates or distant cousins. Never next to Daniel. At the annual family fundraisers, she'd introduce me as Claire, Daniel's wife. She teaches art to little kids. Isn't that sweet? I'd smile, pretending not to notice how her lips curled around the word art like it was some kind of joke. But I endured it. For Daniel. For the possibility that one day things would change. Then we had Lily. Everything about her was perfect to me, from her mop of curly brown hair to the way she hummed while coloring. She didn't fit the Caldwell mold either. She wasn't into ballet like her cousin Avery, didn't care for French lessons or etiquette classes. Lily loved painting sunsets, building fairy houses out of sticks, and reading chapter books under the covers with a flashlight. She was magic. But to the Caldwells, she was quirky, their polite way of saying not one of us. Every Christmas, Margaret threw a lavish celebration at their estate in Lake Forest, staff in matching uniforms, imported decorations, a 12-foot tree dripping in designer ornaments. And every year, despite the tension, we went, mostly because Daniel insisted. "They're trying," he'd say. "Give them time." This year, Lily was especially excited. She'd spent 2 weeks working on a watercolor portrait of the family estate, her Christmas gift to Margaret and Charles. "Do you think Grandma will hang it in the hallway?" she asked me the night before. I couldn't look her in the eye. Maybe I said, "It's a beautiful painting." She believed me. She always believes me. And so we arrived, gifts in hand, hope in heart, only to witness what would become the final crack in the fragile bridge between our 2 worlds. But I didn't know that yet. Not when Lily ran ahead clutching her painting. Not when Margaret air-kissed my cheek and told me my sweater was festive. Not even when we were seated, Daniel, near his father, me at the far end with someone's elderly cousin. No. The moment I realized things were different this year, that something irreversible had happened, was when I watched my daughter's name go unspoken, unacknowledged, and entirely forgotten. Except it wasn't forgotten. It was deliberate. And that's where this story truly begins. If you've ever felt like the outsider at a table where you should have been honored, drop a comment and share your experience. This isn't just my story. It's one that too many of us know all too well. I met Daniel Caldwell during my junior year of college. I was hauling canvases across campus for an art showcase when he stopped to hold the door open for me. Tall, impeccably dressed, and flashing the kind of smile that made you forget your own name, he looked nothing like someone who'd ever ridden a city bus. I found out later he hadn't. Not once. Daniel was majoring in finance, a legacy student from the kind of family that bought buildings in their name. I was balancing 3 part-time jobs to stay afloat and couldn't even afford a parking pass. But somehow, we clicked. Maybe it was his curiosity about my world, the way he listened when I talked about composition and color theory, or the fact that he never flinched when I told him my dad had never been around. He made me feel seen. For 2 years, we dated in what felt like a bubble. Sure, I'd heard the term old money, but I didn't really understand what it meant, not until I was invited to the Caldwell estate for Thanksgiving. From the outside, it looked like a movie set, red brick mansion, white columns, manicured lawns that looked painted on. Inside, it was colder. Not temperature-wise, emotionally. The moment I walked through those doors, I felt like I'd stepped into a museum where nothing was meant to be touched. And I wasn't just another guest. I was the display they didn't request. Margaret greeted me with a thin smile. "Claire, isn't it, Daniel's artist friend?" I corrected her. "Girlfriend, actually." Her smile didn't move. Dinner was worse. Every question directed at me was laced with condescension. "So, do you sell your work? Or is it more of a passion project? Do you find teaching fulfilling even with the salary?" At one point, Charles Daniel's father actually said, "It's refreshing to meet someone from a simpler background. Keeps things grounded." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a tranquilizer. Later that night, Daniel apologized profusely. "They just don't know any better," he whispered. "They're stiff, but they'll come around, I promise." I believed him. 2 years later, we got married. It was a small wedding, my choice, in a botanical garden with string lights and hand-painted place cards. Margaret didn't attend. Charles came but left before the cake was cut. No gift. No toast. Daniel tried to smooth it over. She had a charity auction. You know how involved she is in the community. What I knew was that she couldn't stomach seeing her son marry someone who once lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. Still, we built a life. We moved into a modest home in Evanston. I got a job teaching at a local elementary school. Daniel took a position at his father's investment firm. And then Lily arrived, a bright, sensitive little girl who loved sidewalk chalk music and talking to squirrels in the backyard. I remember the day we told Margaret we were expecting. She blinked, sipped her tea, and said, "Well, I suppose every family needs a wild card." It was the closest she ever got to enthusiasm. But what she lacked in warmth, she made up for in control. From Lily's preschool to her piano lessons, Margaret had opinions. "No granddaughter of mine will attend public school. Why doesn't she wear bows? That haircut makes her look curious." I bit my tongue so often I should have been speechless. Still, for Daniel's sake, I played along. We attended every holiday event, every cousin's recital, every over-decorated gala. I wore the right dresses. I smiled at the right people. I pretended I didn't hear the whispers, and all the while I kept hoping Margaret might change. Then Lily turned 5 and everything shifted. We'd enrolled her in a local art camp just for fun. That summer she came home every day covered in paint and joy. She started leaving little sketches around the house, including one of Daniel reading to her on the couch. It was stunning. The proportions, the shading at 5. I knew I wasn't just seeing a proud mom's fantasy. The girl had talent. Margaret dismissed it. Children should be well-rounded, not eccentric, she said when I showed her the drawing. Art is fine for hobbies, but let's focus on something practical like coding. Lily didn't even know how to spell coding, but Daniel was proud. That was the first time I saw him really push back. Mom, she's 5, he said. Let her love what she loves. I held on to that moment for years. Because the truth is, Daniel's love for us was never the issue. It was his fear of shaking the foundation he was raised on, fear of losing their approval. He'd been trained from birth to preserve the Caldwell image, and I was the smudge no one wanted on the frame. Still, he stayed by my side. Still, we raised Lily with kindness, freedom, and the belief that her worth was never tied to anyone's last name. But as we sat in that massive dining room on Christmas Eve, I realized love wasn't enough if it meant watching our daughter be erased. If you've ever had to bite your lip just to keep the peace, only to wonder later if your silence cost someone else their voice, tell me about it. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear today. Lily was born on a cloudy afternoon in late September, the kind of day where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or shine. She came into the world quiet, not silent, just calm, with wide eyes that took in everything before crying. That was my first clue she would be different. Not odd, not difficult, just beautifully, unshakably herself. From the moment she could hold a crayon, Lily began to draw. Not scribble draw. Animals with personalities. Houses with emotion. People with stories. At age 4, she drew a picture of our front porch, complete with the crack in the railing and the sunflower Daniel planted that summer. At 5, she sketched our neighbor's cat with such eerie accuracy that Mrs. Timmons asked to frame it. She was an artist even then, but more than that, she was sensitive. She could walk into a room and feel the mood before anyone spoke. She hated loud arguments even on TV, and she never interrupted. Not because she was shy, but because she was always listening. Of course, in the world of the Caldwells, these were not virtues. They were quirks. She's so quiet, Margaret once remarked at a family brunch. You should enroll her in public speaking. It's important to be assertive these days. Charles chimed in without looking up from his newspaper. She'll need that confidence if she wants to compete with the real go-getters. I wanted to scream. But Lily, she just smiled politely and went back to drawing on her napkin with a pen she'd snuck from my purse. Daniel and I tried to shield her as best we could. At home, she flourished. We filled our living room with paints and brushes, hung her artwork on the fridge, and walls enrolled her in Saturday morning art classes. She read constantly. She started writing poems in a little spiral notebook with a unicorn on the cover. She told me once, Mom, I think colors talk. Some of them are friends and some of them don't like each other. I believed her, but family gatherings were different. At Caldwell functions, she dimmed. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She stood slightly behind me, observing instead of joining. Her cousins all primped and posed in matching outfits were everything she wasn't. Loud, confident, prepared to perform. I remember one particular Thanksgiving. The kids were asked to sing a song for the adults. Avery played piano. Ethan recited a monologue. Margaret turned to Lily with an expectant look. And what will you be doing, sweetheart? Lily blinked. I made something, she said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing of a harvest table complete with everyone seated around it. She'd included every detail from Margaret's pearl earrings to Charles's wine glass. Margaret looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. How thoughtful, she said, setting it aside. Now who wants pumpkin pie? Lily's smile faded just a little. That night, I sat on the edge of her bed while she tried not to cry. Was it not good enough, she asked. Should I have sung a song instead? No, I told her. It was perfect. But some people don't understand art the way you do. She nodded slowly. Maybe next time I'll bring a poem. I held her until she fell asleep, my heart aching with the familiar guilt of bringing her into spaces that didn't deserve her light. Still, she tried. That's what gets me most. Despite everything, the whispered comparisons, the subtle dismissals, the exclusion masked as oversight, Lily never stopped trying. This Christmas she was determined to make it count. She worked for weeks on a watercolor painting of the Caldwell estate in winter icicles hanging from the roof. Snow-dusted hedges, the family's Great Dane asleep by the fireplace. She asked me 3 separate times if I thought Grandma would like it. I told her yes each time, though inside I wasn't sure Margaret would even notice. "She'll hang it in the hallway with the others," Lily said hopefully. "Maybe next to the painting of the lake house." I nodded. That would be a perfect spot. What else could I say? That the hallway was reserved for oil portraits of cousins in private school uniforms and expensive frames. That no matter how gifted Lily was, she would always be invisible to them. No, I wouldn't take that hope from her. She wrapped the painting herself in silver paper with a blue ribbon. "Because Grandma says silver and blue are elegant," she explained. Daniel told her it looked amazing. We all pretended it would be okay. And if you've ever watched your child try to win love, that should have been unconditional from the start and had to keep smiling so they wouldn't see your fear you're not alone. Tell me what you held back to protect them. Sometimes sharing the truth helps us breathe again. The day of the Caldwell Christmas gathering began with an eerie calm. Lily was up before the sun, humming to herself as she got ready, her tiny hands smoothing the red velvet dress she insisted on wearing, the same one Margaret had sent last Christmas. It was tighter now, sleeves creeping up her arms, hem a little shorter than I liked. But she beamed with pride. "Grandma gave me this," she said, spinning in front of the mirror. "She'll be happy I wore it." I didn't have the heart to say otherwise. Daniel filled our travel mugs with coffee while I packed Lily's painting carefully in a gift bag. He was unusually chipper that morning, making hopeful commentary about who'd be there and how this year felt different. I smiled, but inside I was bracing myself like someone waiting for a wave they know is coming, even if the sky is still blue. The Caldwell estate in Lake Forest was an hour's drive from our home. With each mile, my stomach grew tighter. Lily sat in the back seat, her painting balanced across her lap like something sacred. She rehearsed her speech out loud. "Hi, Grandma. I made this for you. I hope you like it. It's the house with snow, and the dog, and the fireplace you like." She repeated it with the focus of a child trying to earn her way in. When we arrived, the valet opened our car door before we even turned off the engine. That's how it always was, precise, choreographed like a play where we never got speaking roles. As we stepped into the foyer, we were greeted by soft classical music, the smell of cinnamon and pine, and the glint of gold-threaded garlands hanging from the banisters. Margaret appeared almost instantly. Dressed in ivory cashmere and dripping in pearls, she moved toward Daniel with open arms. "Darling," she cooed, pressing her cheek near his in the faintest imitation of affection. Then she turned to me. "Claire, that sweater is festive. Not warm, not lovely. Festive like a seasonal placemat." She bent toward Lily, who clutched the gift bag with both hands. "My goodness, you've grown," Margaret said. "The other children are in the playroom. Go ahead and join them." Margot is showing off her new riding ribbons. Lily hesitated, glancing up at me. I nodded. "Go on, sweetheart. We'll be right here." She walked off slowly, the painting swinging slightly at her side, while Margaret turned to greet another guest. Her attention shifted so fast I could barely process the dismissal. We moved deeper into the house, which had been transformed into something that looked like the lobby of a 5-star hotel during the holidays. A 14-foot Christmas tree stood in the center of the living room, ornaments arranged with surgical precision. White roses and silver centerpieces sat on every flat surface. It was breathtaking and utterly sterile. Daniel's sister Vanessa caught his arm and immediately launched into a rundown of their recent trip to St. Bart's. "You really should have joined us," she said. "The water was unreal. We hadn't been invited. We never were. Claire," she added finally, glancing in my direction, "that color suits you." She didn't say what color. I just nodded and smiled. The rest of the hour passed in a blur of stiff air kisses, obligatory questions, and small talk that made me feel like I was swimming underwater. No one asked about my work. No one asked about Lily. They asked about real estate markets and investment portfolios and who had finally gotten their kids into which private academies. When I finally found Lily again, she was standing near the grand staircase alone, watching her cousins shriek over new designer backpacks and monogrammed slippers. I crouched beside her. "Everything okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "Margot said my dress is last year's style. Emma said her mom says we don't live in the right neighborhood." I clenched my teeth. "Well, those aren't very kind things to say, are they?" She shook her head. "I put my painting under the tree like Grandpa said." I looked across the room to the tree where a sea of perfectly wrapped gifts in coordinating colors sat stacked in gleaming piles. Somewhere among them, wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon, was the only present that came from love instead of obligation. That one tiny handmade gift was invisible among the glittering masses. Have you ever stood in a room full of people and felt like no one saw the person who matters most to you? Tell me. I want to hear how you handled it, or how you wish you had, because moments like this, they leave marks. Dinner that night was like stepping into a magazine spread. The formal dining room glowed under a grand chandelier, the kind that sparkled so brightly it made everything else seem dull by comparison, even emotions. A massive centerpiece of gold-dipped pine cones, white roses and greenery ran down the length of the table, flanked by crystal candlesticks and name cards written in flawless calligraphy. I found mine near the far end, squeezed between a second cousin I barely remembered and one of Charles's business partners. Daniel, of course, sat up front beside his father, the hierarchy of the Caldwell family maintained, not just in legacy, but in literal seating. Lily wasn't even at the table. She'd been relegated to the kids' nook in the adjacent breakfast room, a side table with plastic holly placemats, and child-sized chairs barely in sight from where I sat. I could just make out her profile, her little hands folded politely in her lap, her lips moving as she quietly thanked the server placing a plate in front of her. That moment hit harder than it should have. Not because I expected anything else I knew the Caldwells, but because Lily deserved better. She was kind, brilliant, creative, and yet she was pushed to the margins like an afterthought. As the first course, a delicate butternut squash soup drizzled with truffle oil was served, Margaret lifted her glass and orchestrated conversation like a maestro. "Grace, tell us about Emma's violin recital," she beamed. Grace launched into a 10-minute account of how Emma had been selected for a junior conservatory program, concluding with the director said she's years ahead of her age group. Polite applause followed. Next came the other grandkids. Tyler had won a robotics challenge. Isabel had learned to ski. Every child was acknowledged, their accomplishments polished and presented like rare gems. Except Lily. Twice Daniel tried to interject. Lily won a district-wide art competition, he said once, almost too casually, as if trying not to make it a big deal. Margaret didn't even pause. She nodded vaguely and turned to someone else to ask about summer travel plans. The second time he tried harder. Her painting was selected to be featured in the town gallery, he said. It was judged anonymously and the curator said, "That's lovely," Margaret said, cutting him off, already raising her voice to toast someone's new job promotion. I watched Lily from across the room. She wasn't eating. Her fork was in her hand, unmoving. Her eyes were on the adults, scanning their faces as if looking for a sign of pride, some acknowledgement, some validation. She didn't find it. And neither did I. The man beside me, I think his name was Gerald, leaned in. "So, you're an art teacher?" he asked, his tone dripping with polite disinterest. "Yes," I said, trying not to sigh. "How quaint," he replied. "My wife volunteered in schools before we had children. She found it quite fulfilling. Gave her purpose, you know." I stared at him for a beat too long before responding. "Yes, purpose is important." I turned away, unable to keep the bitterness from rising. By the time the main course was served, a perfect beef Wellington with glazed carrots and whipped potatoes that probably took someone hours to plate, I had officially checked out. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to make small talk. I wanted to scoop Lily into my arms and take her home. But I didn't. Because we were still playing our roles in the grand production called The Caldwell Legacy. And breaking character wasn't allowed. Just then, I heard Margaret's voice again. "Daniel," she said sweetly. "Are you still in that charming starter home?" Daniel smiled tightly. "It works for us. We love the neighborhood. Lily's school is wonderful." Margaret gave a tight laugh. Of course. But when you're ready for something more appropriate, let us know. Your father and I would be happy to help." Help! Code for approve the decision, oversee the process, take credit. Daniel didn't respond. He just reached for his water, took a long sip, and changed the subject. But the tone had been set. When Charles raised his glass and made a toast to family legacy and the children who carry our name forward, he listed every grandchild by name, except Lily. I watched Daniel's jaw tighten. I saw the apology in his eyes when he glanced at me, and I knew he felt it too. The exclusion wasn't subtle anymore. It was a statement. If you've ever been erased in a room full of people who should have protected you, tell me. Share what you wish you'd said out loud, even if you never got the chance. Sometimes, writing it down is the first step to reclaiming your voice. After dinner, the procession moved into the grand living room where Margaret announced with the same performative enthusiasm as a stage actor delivering a final monologue. And now, Santa has been very generous this year. The children squealed. Parents clapped politely. Staff shifted discreetly into place, ready to assist with the great Caldwell gift exchange. The living room looked like something out of a luxury catalog. The tree stood regal and towering branches weighed down by glass ornaments and metallic ribbon. Beneath it, a mountain of coordinated presents, each one wrapped in gold cream or burgundy, each adorned with an elaborate bow, and each tagged with the same elegant calligraphy that had marked our dinner seating. It was overwhelming and meant to be. Margaret and Charles always said children should remember magic. What they really meant was children should remember hierarchy. Charles stood beside the tree, reading glasses perched low on his nose, a clipboard in hand. As is tradition, he said, "We'll go youngest to oldest." The first name called was Emma Grace's daughter. She marched up with confidence, already glowing in anticipation. A staff member handed her 5 packages each, the size of a shoebox or larger. Emma opened them like a pro. A designer coat, a pearl bracelet, an iPad, a limited edition book set, and a voucher for equestrian lessons. "Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa," she squealed, hugging them both. Margaret bent down, cupping Emma's cheek. "Only the best for our little star." Next came Tyler, then Ethan, then more cousins. Each child was called up. Each child received multiple luxury gifts. Even the kids of distant relatives, some of whom I was sure hadn't been at dinner, were given beautifully wrapped boxes. I looked over at Lily. She stood off to the side, her hands clasped in front of her eyes shining, still hopeful, still believing, still waiting. Daniel leaned toward me. "She'll be next." But she wasn't. One by one, the names were read aloud. One by one, the gifts were handed out. The pile under the tree shrank steadily until there were only adult gifts left, the ones wrapped in heavier paper meant for show. Still no one said Lily's name. She glanced over at me, then at Daniel. Her little smile faltered, but she didn't speak. Her shoulders straightened. Her chin lifted. She stood taller than I'd ever seen her. It broke me. Charles cleared his throat and said, "That concludes the children's gifts. Now for the grown-ups." Daniel stood. The room hushed immediately. "You forgot someone," he said. His voice was calm, but his hand still holding mine trembled. Charles looked confused. Margaret's eyes widened just slightly, too controlled to be genuine surprise. "Who?" she asked a little too quickly. "Lily," Daniel replied. "You didn't call Lily." "Oh," Margaret said with a soft chuckle. "There must have been a mix-up." I'm sure her gifts are, don't I said before I could stop myself. It came out quiet but sharp. Margaret's mouth closed. Lily looked down at her shoes. It's okay, she said. Maybe Santa got confused. That one sentence. It echoed through the room like a crack in a mirror, delicate and final. No one spoke. No one moved. Grace suddenly became very interested in adjusting Emma's ponytail. A few guests looked anywhere but at us. Even some of the kids were quiet now, clutching their toys in awkward silence. And still Margaret smiled. Have you ever seen someone smile while another person crumbled? If you've ever watched someone you love be humiliated not by accident, but by design, share it. Say it out loud. You deserve to be heard. Daniel released my hand and reached into his jacket pocket. Daniel didn't speak right away. He just stood there in the silence, one hand slowly reaching into the inner pocket of his blazer. Every pair of eyes in the room, some confused, some already uncomfortable, turned to him as he pulled out a cream-colored envelope. Margaret's smile faltered for the first time all evening. Jason, she said she only called him Daniel. When she wanted something, we agreed to coordinate gifts this year, remember? To avoid duplication. But he didn't even look at her. He walked across the room straight to Lily and knelt so they were eye to eye. This is for you, sweetheart, he said softly. Your mom and I have been waiting for just the right moment. She looked up at me, eyes wide. I gave her a tiny nod. Go ahead. Lily took the envelope carefully and slid her finger beneath the flap. She pulled out a few papers, thick cream stock with gold lettering. Not something an 8-year-old could easily understand, but the seal impressed her. She ran her hand over the top page, tracing the embossed logo with her finger. What is it, Daddy? She asked. Daniel smiled. And this time it was real. Not the polished, polite smile he wore for every family event. It was warm, fierce, proud. It's your future, Lily, and we saved it for last because it's the most important gift of all. A few murmurs rippled across the room. Margaret shifted in her seat. Charles leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes. Inside that envelope, Daniel said, rising to his full height and turning to address the entire room, are the documents for an educational trust fund we started for Lily the day she was born. Silence. We've contributed to it every single month for 8 years, he continued. Because we believe she deserves a future that doesn't depend on anyone's approval, a future built on love, not conditions. A gasp escaped from someone in the back of the room. Daniel, Charles warned, voice low. But Daniel wasn't finished. She doesn't need a pile of gifts to prove her worth. She doesn't need a seat at this table to be valid. What she needs is freedom. Freedom to be herself, and to know that her value isn't decided by how many designer boxes she unwraps on Christmas Eve. I was frozen. So was everyone else. But Lily, sweet, brilliant. Lily was standing tall, eyes glowing, clutching her envelope like it was made of gold. And that's not all, Daniel added, voice steady. Lily, can you find the other paper? She flipped through the documents and pulled out another folded sheet. What's this? She asked. Daniel took a breath. That, sweetheart, is proof that we bought a new house. I blinked. My mouth opened before I could stop it. What? He turned to me now, smiling softly. It's in Denver. 4 bedrooms, big backyard, a massive oak tree, perfect for that treehouse I promised you. We close in January. Gasps, whispers. Charles stood abruptly. Denver, Margaret echoed. But that's halfway across the country. 2,000 miles to be exact, Daniel replied. And I've accepted a regional director position with my firm's Western division. Better salary, better hours. And most importantly, he looked straight at me. A fresh start. That's when it hit me. He hadn't just pulled a surprise gift. He had orchestrated our freedom. If you've ever watched someone choose you, not just say they love you, but show it in front of those who once made you feel small, you know the power in that moment. Drop a comment if you've ever had someone finally stand up for you, because some silences deserve to be broken. The room erupted, not with applause, not with joy, but with confusion. and under it all, tension. Margaret rose slowly from her chair, her hand resting lightly on the back of it as if she needed the support. She wasn't used to surprises. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not in her own home. "You bought a house? In Denver?" She said, her voice tight. Her lips stretched into a smile that had completely lost its warmth. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "We close in 2 weeks. Claire and I are taking Lily to see it next weekend. And this is permanent." Daniel nodded. "We've already submitted our notice to Lily's school. Claire's accepted a teaching position out there. It's happening." Silence. The kind that feels like it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Vanessa blinked like she'd missed something. Grace's mouth parted slightly as if searching for a way to break the moment with polite chatter and failing. Charles looked livid, his face slowly reddening as he stared at Daniel like he was watching a traitor take the podium. "But why would you make a decision like this without consulting us?" Margaret asked, eyes flitting to me like I'd somehow infected her son with disobedience. Daniel let out a short breath, part laugh, part disbelief. "Because I'm 36 years old. Because I'm a husband and a father. And because we don't need your permission to build the kind of life we actually want." "And you're just going to leave?" Charles asked. "Leave the firm? Leave everything we built?" Daniel turned toward his father, his voice quiet but powerful. "What you built was a legacy that required sacrifice. But I'm not sacrificing my daughter's self-worth or my wife's peace of mind to keep it alive. That's not a legacy I want Lily to inherit." There it was. Truth raw and full, finally spoken aloud. I saw Margaret glance around the room, trying to gauge who was on her side. But this wasn't a debate, it was a declaration. Still, she tried one last time. "And what about Lily? She loves her cousins, her routines. You'd uproot her from everything she knows." Before Daniel could respond, Lily did. Standing beside him, small but radiant, she said, "I want to go. I don't want to feel invisible anymore." It landed like a lightning strike. You could hear the gasp ripple through the room. Charles looked away. Grace suddenly found a reason to gather napkins. Even Emma, who had just been bragging about her ski pass earlier, seemed stunned. But I felt a swell of emotion I hadn't let myself feel in years. Pride, relief. Love so big it pressed against my ribs like it couldn't fit. Margaret opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "No," I said. Calm, controlled. The way women only get when they're done being interrupted. "This isn't up for debate. We've tried, Margaret, for years. We played by the rules. We bit our tongues. We showed up. And still our daughter was made to feel like she didn't belong. That stops now." I took Lily's hand and smiled down at her. "We're not raising her to wait for love. We're raising her to know she never has to earn it." Daniel stepped beside me, wrapping an arm around both of us. "And that begins with leaving. Have you ever made the kind of decision that shakes your entire world loose, not because you were reckless, but because you were finally brave? Tell me. I want to hear your story. Someone else might need that courage too." We didn't stay for dessert. As Charles and Margaret scrambled to reassert control, offering last-minute promises of revisiting this and reconsidering everything, Daniel and I quietly gathered our coats. No dramatic exit, no shouting, just closure. Lily still clutching the envelope with her trust documents, and the Denver house photo Daniel had tucked inside slipped quietly behind us as we walked out through the grand foyer. Her red velvet dress, the one she had worn with such pride that morning, now looked too small in every way. She didn't say a word until we were in the car. Then, from the back seat, she whispered, "I thought Grandma would like my painting." Daniel and I locked eyes in the front. I turned to face her. "She missed out, honey," I said. "She missed out on something beautiful." And she had. That painting, still sitting under the tree, untouched, unopened, possibly even unnoticed, was the most real thing in that whole house. Not the cashmere, not the monogrammed luggage, not the empty praise passed around like wine glasses. A child's honest offering made with love had been dismissed. That told us everything we needed to know. The drive home was quiet. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her cheek pressed against the window, the envelope still tucked into her arms like a treasure. Daniel reached for my hand across the console and held it the rest of the way. We didn't speak until we were parked in our driveway. "You really bought the house?" I said, finally, still half stunned. He nodded. "I've been looking since summer. I wanted to surprise you both. I wanted it to be something joyful, not reactive, not bitter." "It is," I said. "It really is." But beneath my gratitude was something else too, a deep ache I hadn't acknowledged. Because while we were choosing to leave, the truth was, we should have left years ago. The signs had always been there. The quiet slights, the backhanded compliments, the intentional absences when we needed support. But like so many children of powerful families, we stayed too long hoping love would eventually look like what we'd always imagined. It never did. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, her new future safely resting on her nightstand, I wandered into the living room. The tree lights were still on. Our modest little tree with mismatched ornaments and pipe cleaner stars. I sat there in the dark thinking about how different this Christmas had turned out. How painful, how freeing. Daniel joined me, sitting on the floor at my feet, leaning back against the couch like we used to when we were broke newlyweds watching movies on a laptop. "I know I blindsided you," he said. "No," I said. "You saved us." He looked up at me. "You don't think it's too late?" "No," I said. "I think it's finally on time." Because this wasn't just about Lily. It wasn't just about one bad Christmas or one cruel oversight. It was about the slow unraveling of a story we no longer fit inside. A story written by someone else for someone else and forced on us with velvet gloves. We were done performing. We were ready to live. Have you ever walked away not because you didn't care, but because you finally realized you did, that your peace was worth more than your place at the table? If so, you're not alone. Tell me your moment. We're all rewriting the story together. The next morning felt lighter. Not because anything had magically resolved, we were still the black sheep now officially turned out, but because something had shifted. We weren't pretending anymore. Lily woke up to snow outside her window. "Can we still open our gifts?" she asked, eyes hopeful but cautious. "Of course," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Christmas still lives here." We spent the morning in pajamas, sipping cocoa, tearing open gifts wrapped in brown paper and scribbled with glitter glue. Daniel had gotten me a pair of vintage watercolor brushes I'd admired once in passing. I'd bought him a journal with a leather cover and a note inside, "For the life you're finally writing for yourself." Lily beamed over a sketchbook, a set of markers, and a promise that we'd decorate her new room in any way she wanted. It wasn't fancy. It was free. Later that afternoon, while Lily napped on the couch surrounded by her new markers and the dog asleep at her feet, Daniel turned to me and said, "They'll reach out." "I know. They'll want to fix it, offer some compromise." I nodded. "And we'll listen. But we won't bend." That was the difference now. Before, we had folded ourselves small to fit inside their image of who we should be. Now we weren't shrinking anymore. And sure enough, it started with a text. From Grace. "Sorry about last night. Things got complicated." Emma wanted to thank Lily for the card she made. "Can we swing by sometime next week?" Daniel and I stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even disingenuous. It was safe. Grace was always the middle ground messenger. Too polite to rock the boat, too cautious to ever really stand up. "What do you think?" I asked. Daniel shrugged. "I think we reply when we're ready, and not before." Because that was the power we had now, the power of pause, of no longer rushing to smooth over discomfort we didn't cause. 2 days later, a package arrived. No note, just a box addressed to Lily. Inside was a gold-embossed frame, and behind the glass, her painting, the one she'd left under the tree. It was unwrapped, the ribbon gone. But the art, her art, was displayed as if it had always been meant for admiration. We showed it to her, gently preparing for confusion. But Lily just looked at it, then said, "I think it's better at home." She was right. We hung it in the new house when we moved, right in the front hallway across from the mirror. Every guest who walked in would see it. Every guest would know this house was built on love, not approval. And that's the thing about finally choosing yourself. It's not loud. It's not revenge. It's quiet, soft, steady, but it echoes. If you've ever claimed peace over perfection or love over legacy, comment below. We're building something new here together. Moving to Denver was like stepping into a new world, one painted not with the stiff brush strokes of expectation, but with the broad, vivid swaths of possibility. The house we bought wasn't a sprawling mansion or a trophy property. It was a craftsman-style home built a century ago, complete with a massive oak tree out back, perfect for the treehouse Daniel promised Lily he'd build. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with families who waved hello and didn't care about designer labels or legacy. Lily thrived immediately. Her new school was a progressive elementary that valued creativity as much as academics. Her art teacher recognized her talent, encouraging her to experiment, to express, to be herself without apology. She made friends who didn't whisper about her dress or her background, but instead traded sketches and stories during recess. I found a teaching position that honored my passion for art education. My students weren't future investment bankers or socialites. They were just kids, curious, messy, full of wonder. And I was finally home. Daniel's new role as a regional director gave him balance he'd never had before. He coached Lily's soccer team, was home for dinner every night, and carried a calm with him that made me believe we were finally safe. Safe from the suffocating grip of a family that never truly wanted us. We heard from Andrew often. He moved to Chicago starting fresh with his kids. He visited us twice, and even helped Lily organize video calls with cousins who until recently felt more like strangers. Eleanor tried to reach out. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, phone calls that hovered on the surface, but never dived into real connection. Margaret sent an invitation for a visit, once then canceled at the last minute. Marcus followed through on his threats, removing Daniel from his will and family business holdings. Daniel handled the legal notices with quiet equanimity, filing them away without comment. Grace surprised us the most. Months after our move, she called Daniel. Her voice was vulnerable, curious. 3 months later, she visited with Emma for a weekend, an awkward start that slowly softened into genuine connection. Emma and Lily discovered shared interests beyond the glossy surface. The Caldwells valued art, music, books, real laughter. Grace admitted in a late-night conversation over wine that she was beginning to question the values she'd once accepted without thought. Maybe there was more to family than appearances and achievements. 1 year later, as we prepared for our second Christmas in Denver, I stood in our living room surrounded by Lily's artwork, including a special painting she made of our new house. It hung in the place of honor, a beacon of our journey. Our Christmas tree was a mix of new ornaments from Colorado adventures and treasured pieces from our past. It was imperfect, messy, beautiful. The doorbell rang. Lily raced to answer, knowing we weren't expecting family but friends. The chosen family we'd built, grounded in mutual respect, unconditional love, and genuine affection. As laughter and conversation filled our home, I caught Daniel's eye across the room. He smiled and raised his glass in a quiet toast. One envelope changed everything. But the true gift was the courage to choose love over obligation, authenticity over appearance, and happiness over hollow legacy. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself and build a new kind of family, I want to hear from you. Comment below, share your journey. Let's remind each other that freedom is the greatest gift we can give. Life away from the Caldwell estate wasn't always easy, but it was ours. The quiet mornings in Denver, the impromptu family dinners, the freedom to laugh without calculation, these were gifts we never knew we needed. We still got updates about the family drama back east. Margaret's attempts at reconciliation were more about appearances than heart. Charles remained distant, holding tightly to his vision of legacy and control. But Daniel had made it clear our family was now the one we chose. Andrew stayed close, often texting or calling, sharing his own struggles to break free from the expectations that had bound him for so long. His children became like cousins to Lily, and we watched with hope as those friendships blossomed despite the miles. The most unexpected visitor was Grace. After months of awkward visits, her walls slowly came down. One evening, over wine and stories, she admitted her doubts about the values she'd been raised with. She began questioning what legacy truly meant. Was it wealth and status, or was it love, support, and acceptance? That moment felt like the first crack in the family's polished facade, a crack we had long hoped for, but never expected. As Christmas approached again, our little home buzzed with excitement. The tree was adorned with handmade ornaments from Lily's school and little gifts from friends who had become family. The warmth radiated from the walls, unlike the cold elegance of our past. We spent the day surrounded by genuine affection and laughter. No pretense, no judgment, just us. The envelope that had once seemed like a simple gift now represented so much more, a symbol of freedom, of courage, and of the life we'd chosen together. As Daniel and I sat by the fire that night watching Lily sleep soundly, I whispered, "We did the right thing." He squeezed my hand. "The best thing." Have you ever chosen to redefine family on your own terms, to find love beyond bloodlines? If so, share your story below. Together we create new traditions, new legacies, ones that honor who we truly are. The morning sun poured through the large windows of our Denver home, illuminating the colorful chaos of Lily's art supplies scattered across the kitchen table. This house, our new beginning, was nothing like the cold, pristine halls we'd left behind. It was warm, lived in, filled with laughter and possibility. Daniel was in the backyard laying the foundation for Lily's promised treehouse beneath the sprawling oak. She stood nearby, handing him nails and paintbrushes, her eyes bright with excitement. This was her world, now a place where she belonged without question. Inside, I prepared breakfast, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with pancakes and sizzling bacon. Our morning routine was simple, but rich with love. No expectations, no judgments. Just family. This house had 3 bedrooms, a cozy finished basement that I planned to turn into an art studio, and a backyard that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the Colorado sky. It was perfect in its imperfections, much like us. Lily's school was less about prestige and more about nurturing creativity and critical thinking. She made friends easily and was encouraged to explore her talents without the weight of comparison. Daniel's new job gave him hours he never dreamed possible. He coached Lily's soccer team, attended parent-teacher nights, and came home every evening eager to hear about our day. We were thriving, not because we escaped, but because we chose to build something better. I often thought back to the night Daniel pulled that envelope from his jacket, the night our lives changed forever. It wasn't just about the trust fund or the house purchase. It was about reclaiming our dignity and rewriting our story. The lessons we learned were hard, but invaluable. Love isn't conditional, family isn't always defined by blood, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from those who don't see your worth. As I hung Lily's latest painting, a bright, joyful depiction of our house surrounded by wildflowers on the living room wall, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the struggles that led us here, for the strength we found in each other, and for the future we were creating. If you're ready to break free from toxic expectations and build a life grounded in love and authenticity, share your journey with me. Together we can inspire others to find their own freedom. The attempts at reconciliation from Margaret and Charles came slowly and cautiously, like hesitant footsteps in a quiet room. At first, it was small gestures, a birthday card here, a Christmas gift there. Each was carefully measured, wrapped in the kind of politeness that felt more like a transaction than an offering. Their calls were infrequent conversations, guarded and superficial. They asked about Lily's school or my job, but never about how we were really doing. I could see Daniel's tension every time the phone rang. He'd answer with a polite voice, but the smile rarely reached his eyes. After years of trying to fit into their world, he was learning to guard himself. Legally, Charles followed through on his threats. Daniel was removed from the family will and from the business holdings he'd once been groomed to inherit. The notices came in cold envelopes, the kind that carried the weight of finality. Daniel filed them away without a word. What surprised us most was Grace. 6 months after our move, she called out of the blue. Her voice was softer, less rehearsed than I remembered. She wanted to hear about our new life, about Lily, about what we'd left behind. 3 months later, she visited us in Denver with Emma. The weekend started with awkward silences and forced smiles, but slowly gave way to genuine conversations. We shared stories, laughter, and even a few tears. Emma and Lily found common ground beyond the old rivalries and expectations. They painted, played music, and dreamed aloud about a future shaped by their own choices. One evening, Grace confided in me over a glass of wine. She admitted she'd started questioning the values her parents had instilled, the relentless pursuit of status and perfection. She wondered if there was more to family than appearances. That conversation felt like a seed planted, fragile but full of hope. As Christmas approached again, I stood in our Denver home surrounded by the art and warmth that had become our new legacy. Our family was different now, chosen imperfect but whole. The envelope Daniel gave Lily that first Christmas was no longer just a document. It was a symbol of courage, freedom, and the power to choose love over obligation. If you've ever had to redefine family or confront painful truths to protect your own, share your experience. Together we build new legacies, ones rooted in authenticity and love. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear, the fresh snow outside, reflecting the soft glow of our tree lights. Lily was already awake, sitting at the foot of our bed, eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Is it time yet?" she whispered, barely containing her excitement. I smiled, brushing back her curls. "Santa's been here. Why don't you go check your stocking?" She shot out of bed like a little rocket, bounding down the stairs. Daniel groaned, still half asleep. "Merry Christmas," he murmured, pulling me close. Our home was far from the grandeur of the Caldwell estate. The decorations were mismatched ornaments collected from years of adventures and handmade gifts from school. But the warmth inside was palpable. We had splurged on a few special gifts for Lily, a professional art set, books she'd begged for, a tablet for reading and games, and a handcrafted dollhouse I'd found at a local artisan fair. Nothing extravagant, but everything chosen with love and understanding. As Lily tore through her presents, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Daniel opened it to find Andrew standing there, boots dusted with snow, followed by his 3 children. "Sorry to barge in," Andrew said sheepishly. "The kids wanted to see their cousin, and I wanted to check on you." We welcomed them inside. The kids exchanged gifts and laughter, the kind that comes from genuine affection rather than obligation. Andrew pulled Daniel aside to share what had happened after we left the night before. The family was in turmoil. Margaret had broken down, begging Andrew to return for appearances. Charles was furious, threatening to change wills and cut ties. "We're done," Daniel said firmly. "This is our family now." Later, Diana, Andrew's sister-in-law, stopped by with a gift bag for Lily and words of support. The day unfolded with more visitors who stood by us, witnesses to the courage it took to break free. Even Grace showed up, awkward but sincere, delivering a message from her mother, a desperate attempt to smooth things over. But Daniel and I knew better. "We're having our own Christmas," I told her softly. "One built on love, not appearances." As the sun set, I sat beside Daniel by the fire, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "Do you regret it? Standing up like that?" He shook his head. "No, I regret not doing it sooner." Lily's laughter echoed from her room, a reminder that the true legacy isn't wealth or status, it's the freedom to be loved exactly as you are. If you've ever risked everything for love and freedom, share your story below. Together we create new beginnings. After the storm of a Christmas that forever changed our lives, a calm settled over us like a warm blanket. Sitting by the fire watching Lily peacefully sleep, I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The struggle for acceptance from a family that never truly embraced us had been exhausting and painful. But now we had carved out our own space, a sanctuary built not on legacy or wealth, but on unconditional love and respect. Our journey taught me that sometimes freedom requires the courage to say no to toxic expectations, no to hollow traditions, and no to relationships that diminish our worth. Choosing ourselves and our happiness over obligation is not selfish. It is necessary. As we prepare to celebrate many more holidays in our new home, I see how far we've come. The walls are adorned with Lily's artwork, each piece, a testament to her unique spirit and creativity qualities, once dismissed, but now cherished. Our Christmas tree is decorated with memories, love, and hope, rather than designer labels. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt trapped by family pressures or afraid to step into your true self, remember that you are not alone. The hardest battles often lead to the most beautiful victories. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've been inspired or found hope here, please share your story in the comments. Together, we create a community that uplifts, empowers, and celebrates authenticity. May your holidays be filled with genuine joy, love, and the freedom to be exactly who you are. Merry Christmas, and here's to new beginnings.